Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Geoff Dyer's many books include the novel Jeff in Venice, Death in Varanasi, But Beautiful, about jazz, Yoga for People Who Can't Be Bothered to Do It, Zona, about Tarkovsky's film Stalker, Out of Sheer Rage on D.H. Lawrence. Those are just a handful of them. He is a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. His books have won numerous prizes and have been translated into 24 languages. He is the writer in residence at USC. Tosh Berman is a writer and publisher and editor for Tam Tam Books. His memoir, Tosh, Growing Up in Wallace Berman's World, was recently published by City Lights Books. And Molly Lambert is a writer from and in Los Angeles. Please welcome Geoff, Tosh, and Molly.
Hey, everybody. I feel like I've never sat behind a table before. I feel like we're at a press conference. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming out tonight for this event for I Used to Be Charming, the rest of Eve Babitz. I wrote the introduction for this book, and I'm so proud to be affiliated with it and to have participated in it. We're all huge fans of Eve's writing, and we were just going to read a little bit from the book and talk a little bit about Eve and her work. And yeah, that's it. And then maybe do some questions. So I was going to read from My God, Eve, How Can You Live Here? When my sister and I were still rather short, before I turned 13 and refused to go on any more vacations, my parents used to insist on wild adventures during which 2 weeks out of an otherwise perfect summer would be devoted to mountainous roads, flat deserts, or even the Crise de Folie when my father decided it would be a good idea to drive to Mexico City and back in our 48 Pontiac in 14 days. San Francisco, however, was a different story. My sister and I loved San Francisco, and we couldn't see the point of going anywhere else. We loved Golden Gate Park, the Cliff House, Fisherman's Wharf, and Nob Hill. We loved it. We'd save up our money to spend on ravioli and Grant Street. It never occurred to either of us to wonder what kids who were raised in San Francisco would think if they had to go to LA. But now it occurs to me all the time because half my friends live in San Francisco, and flying back and forth all the time as I do, I am under constant fire with such questions as, but how can you live in LA? My poor friends from San Francisco mostly get booked into hotels other than the Chateau Marmont or the Sunset Marquis. The Chateau Marmont and the Sunset Marquis are the only two places people from San Francisco are ever even marginally content, unless whoever's paying for the trip can afford suites at the Beverly Hills Hotel or the Beverly Wilshire. The Chateau Marmont, with its slow elevators, high ceilings, and amazing views, is a bastion of grace holding on by its fingernails against time. Sunset Marquis is pure LA, but like the Chateau, it doesn't have room service, and this seems to be what makes the difference. You cannot pick up the phone and get that deadly hotel food. But the Sunset Marquis has more than that. It has a kind of jolly ambience, like a summer camp for people involved in the industry. There are only 3 business constants in LA: aerospace, real estate, and the industry. Since most of my friends from San Francisco come down to LA to do business with the industry, they should tell whomever it is who's making their reservations to forget about the Holiday Inns or any other of those inns, and that they'll take anything in the Chateau, even an 8x10 cell, or that they want to stay at the Sunset Marquis. I realize what happens to people from San Francisco when they get off in the Burbank airport and suddenly it's hot, the buildings lie low, and it's, my God, Eve, how can you live here? The first time I returned to LA after having moved to San Francisco. These moves are periodic notations in my life for the times I've decided to grow up and leave Hollywood. They last at most 3 months, and then I am drawn back to LA, irresistibly. Just for a day or so, I say to myself, and then suddenly I'm back. My moves to San Francisco seem to occur about once every 7 years. People from San Francisco never come to LA for a vacation the way I'd fly up north just because it's so nice. People from San Francisco think LA is horrible enough just standing there like that without having to actually go voluntarily. It's funny, too, you know, because it's a snap to convert New Yorkers into giving up and loving Los Angeles. Italians take to Hollywood without a backward glance. Englishmen come practically armed with more knowledge about LA than even I know and plunk themselves right into the mainstream with odd remarks about the engineering miracles of the freeway, of all things. And the French, well, they can live anywhere. But my friends from San Francisco won't budge. Like an evil sister who's gone on the stage and enchanted the world, LA may be all right for everyone else, but San Francisco knows all about her and is not impressed. She simply won't do, ladylike San Francisco says. She won't do it all. And when it's unavoidable for business reasons that the northern sister make a trip to the grisly south, she holds her breath until she once more flies over the narrow escape of water that is the San Francisco airport. Meanwhile, people from LA think, wouldn't it be nice to go up and visit darling San Francisco? I know she won't mind. It's like that, I think, from what I've been able to see. And I wouldn't have noticed how little they can stand us up there if I hadn't become aware of the adverbial clause, to LA. Looking at a horrible gold chain that you're supposed to wear around your waist, a person from San Francisco will say, to LA. A person from LA will say, my God, how horrible, it's so Las Vegas. Rent a car, that's rule 1. Let's say that you were from San Francisco and you had to come down to LA for a whole week on business, although you've tried everything to avoid it, but it turns out you have to, and that's all there is to it. The first thing to do, if you haven't done it already, is learn to drive. You will be abjectly miserable in LA if you're at the mercy of other people's cars. You must have your own unit. After you've learned to drive, all you have to do when you get to LA is rent a car and drive to your hotel, which is hopefully not the Continental Hyatt House or a Ramada Inn, unless you really want to immerse yourself in orange plastic. Once you have the keys and are in the airport parking lot ready to go, check your attitude. After all, it's your life. The ideas that you have about cities that you've always known don't work in LA, and once you toss those aside, you'll be much better off. Also, don't break any traffic laws in LA. The LAPD is incorruptible and humorless. Forget about downtown museums, parks, and all the other things pointed to with pride in every town worth its salt except LA. The fact that LA does have a downtown museums and parks has nothing to do with it, and everyone here knows it. I was downtown once 4 years ago to pay a ticket. It was awful. The museum, designed to look like a riverboat floating down the Nile with water and bridges all around, is no fun at all now that the water's been drained, and it never was much fun anyway, unless you've seen this gorgeous Vuillard they've got upstairs with the French Impressionists, or the LA Artists exhibit that's always there. Or if you like Varèse's music and you go to a Monday evening concert where pieces that are too far out for anyone else to touch with a stick are performed regularly by LA musicians who are so adept at sight reading from all the studio work they've done that they can pick up Alvin Berg and just play it. LA doesn't have anything as much fun as Golden Gate Park, but it does have Griffith Park, which is nice to wander in, especially by car, especially up to the observatory where James Dean tried to save Sal Minio's life in Rebel Without a Cause. There are 2 babbling brooks up there, one in Ferndale, which is a primeval heart's desire, just smothered in huge ferns, mossy stones, and wild strawberries. The other brook is in the Bird Sanctuary, where the Byrds' first album cover picture was taken, which is across the street from the Greek Theater. If you went to Vermont and Hollywood Boulevard and loaded yourself up on Italian cheese, artichoke hearts, and salami from Delmonico's, and went next door to Samo's pastry shop and brought fresh Italian strawberry tarts, you could then drive straight up Vermont north and go sit down on the luscious green grass by the Greek Theater and look at the trees. Or you could take the same stuff over to Barnsdall Park, which is just 2 blocks away, south of Hollywood Boulevard and about a block west of Vermont. There, you could look at more trees and grass and see some rather crumbling Frank Lloyd Wright buildings, which sometimes house sweet little exhibits of Maxfield Parrish paintings or photography shows. However, if you're like most people, you probably won't drive farther east than La Brea, and so won't know. Nobody knows about anything in LA except the people who already live here, and most of us never think of taking our out-of-town friends anywhere but those daffy fake places in the marina. Don't go to the marina. Whatever you do, don't even let your business associates take you there for Sunday brunch. You'll fall into a slough of despair which will be almost impossible to shake. Don't go to the marina even if you like stewardesses. They're all out of work now and aren't smiling. The marina is of doubtful interest. These fantastic and troubled new apartment buildings keep incessantly going up, and the stewardesses who move out of one and into another newer one when it gets dirty, which usually takes 6 months, share the unbelievable rents so they can get tan and ride their bicycles along the bicycle paths in hopes of meeting their male equivalent or someone interesting. If you really wanted to see a bunch of stewardesses, you'd already be living in LA, or you'd live in Sausalito and think the Trident is just wonderful. I'm not writing this piece for people who like the Trident. But suppose you'd like to see something grandiose and flashy, something that lives up to your every expectation of Hollywood and Southern California that you've ever, in your weaker moments, owned up to. Then you should take your car out of the parking lot of the Chateau Marmont or the Sunset Marquis and point it west on Sunset and drive to the Beverly Hills Hotel. Like all truly great hotels on Earth, the Beverly Hills is an unflinching masterpiece, better than any museum, shopping center, or the Paris Opera House. There is nothing going on at the Beverly Hills other than a constant battle to maintain perfection. It's better than Chartres because there are no groups of tourists moving from place to place under the supervision of a knowledgeable guide. You can wander around instead at your own pace, and no one has to tell you what to look for. Everyone knows that the Beverly Hills Hotel is the best hotel in the world, and not just because it's so beautiful on the outside, but also because they have the best beds and the most flamboyantly efficient telephone system left in civilization. When you pick up your phone in the Beverly Hills Hotel, having arrived 8 seconds before, the woman says, "Hello, Miss Babitz." She knows. They also take down your phone messages in triplicate, leaving one in the lobby, one under your door, and one for their records in case the other two get lost. The best thing to do is to park your car along Crescent, just north of Sunset Boulevard, and then walk over to the back of the hotel, where an insanely luscious garden is always abloom, around what they call bungalows, which are little pink houses you can rent for about $1,000 a second. Orange trees and jasmine, bougainvillea and palms. Everything along the pathways is tended perpetually by 3 gardeners per square yard. There are never any dead leaves. Nothing ever dies at the Beverly Hills Hotel. It's not allowed to. After strolling around the winding maze in which you can easily become lost and even lose sight of the main hotel, although it is 4 stories high, you could gild the lily by going to the Polo Lounge either for a light lunch. They don't believe anyone should eat more than 3 shrimp, despite what they charge you, or a drink. And you could watch movie people. Watching movie people is child's play in the Polo Lounge because they are the only people in there besides you. In the lobby, you might run into James Baldwin or Dr. Joyce Brothers, or both at once, like I did long ago. But they don't usually go into the Polo Lounge unless it's with a producer. A good thing to do is to ask someone to meet you in the lobby of the Beverly Hills Hotel so you can go to the Polo Lounge for a drink. Then you should arrive about 20 minutes early so you can just sit and watch. You will see people you never thought existed pad softly across the carpeted floor, silent testimony to the fact that Los Angeles is, after all, the center of the universe as far as the industry is concerned. If you're a woman and want to go to the Polo Lounge for a drink alone at the bar, they won't let you. Vestigial amenities, I suppose. There is no women's lib at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Even if you're going to be a hooker, you have to sit at a table. Los Angeles is a city of amazing streets, streets that go on for miles and miles through slums, which in New York would be unattainable delights, fancy business sections, car lots, and palatial mansions. Wilshire Boulevard, an ox and cart road up until about 50 years ago, is a great street to drive to the beach if one has the time, although Sunset Boulevard is even prettier. Los Angeles is a strange city as far as the ocean is concerned, because no other city so close to the sea has ever started inland and branched out later to the beach. San Francisco, like Genoa, Venice, Boston, New York, Tangier, Palermo, Athens, Honolulu, Amsterdam, and New Orleans, is based on the premise of harbors for ships. Los Angeles is the only giant-sized city by an ocean that got around to harbors after the place was already established. I'm going to stop there just because... So yeah, that's just a taste of a great example of Eve's writing, particularly about Los Angeles. Tosh, do you want to read from your book, or you don't have to?
Oh, my Tosh book?
Yeah.
Luckily, I memorized the entire no.
All right.
I want to focus on Eve.
Sure,
All
yeah.
about Eve.
Could you
And-
talk a little bit about your father and how your parents knew each other?
Oh, you got to read the book. My father was an artist named Wallace Berman. And he was the first artist.
Sorry, were you talking to the mic?
Oh, yes, of course. Hello. He was the one of the first artists to have a solo show or a show at the Ferris Gallery in 1957. And the Ferris Gallery was started by Ed Kienholz and Walter Hopps. And it's a very prominent sort of famous gallery now, looking back, because especially when Walter Hopps and Ed Kienholz had it, it was pretty much like an artist-run gallery. And they didn't know what they were doing exactly. So they chose my father, who was fortunate to be the first show. Unfortunately, the police came by and closed the show down and arrested my father, and a lot of the artwork went missing. Supposedly, rumor has it that Walter Hopps had numerous pieces by my father, and Walter is known to be a admirer of collecting art, but sometimes he didn't pay for it. But yet, let bygones be bygones, because Walter was a very close friend of my parents. And I remember as a child, my dad and mom would take me to a lot of gallery openings, and including the Ferris Gallery. And the Ferris Gallery is also famous for having the first Andy Warhol solo show in Los Angeles. I don't think he had a solo show in New York at the time. No. So that's another, and that's when Irving Blum was the director of the Ferris Gallery. And Eve, going back to Eve was always a presence in my life by going to these galleries and Barney's Beanery, which was a bar on Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood. And it was an artist hangout place, and Eve would always be there. And I would see her at openings, and I did not know her very well, but I knew who she was. And because of her presence, I knew she had a very social life, I don't know how else to put it, among artists. And I picked that as a child and a teenager. I picked up that she had a strong relationship with artists, as well as bands like Buffalo Springfield, which she did the album cover, and had the second Buffalo Springfield album. So Eve was very much a strong. You couldn't avoid her. She is part of the Los Angeles landscape, and what makes her really fascinating. There was other people of that time and place, women, including Toni Basil, who strikes me as not like Eve, but somebody who was always in the right place, right time, knew everybody, and just a remarkable person like Eve is. And what I find fascinating about the only time I had a face-to-face conversation with Eve, I think it was at the Grinstein house. The Grinsteins were art collectors, and they were great art collectors and great people. And it was at one of their parties, and I can't remember if I was there before my father died or after, but I was a teenager, or maybe like 20 years old. And I talked to Eve. She actually approached me, and it was very interesting because she was trying to figure out who I am, why I'm there. And they said, you're like Wally Berman's kid, right? And I said, yes. And she said, okay. And then she's still like, I could see her mind working, like, why am I here? Who am I? And then I thought there might be some type of sexual flirtation from her. We're only like 12 years apart, or at the time. So I didn't know what to do. So she just sort of like studied me for a while, and then she lost interest, and she walked away. And I was not hurt by this. I was not charmed, but I thought this was an interesting interaction. I never had talked to an older woman before as 18 or 19-year-old, and because I thought there was something sort of sexual. There was a sexual overtone, and I thought that was remarkable. Many years later, I started reading Eve's books. I read Hollywood Eve. Is it Eve? Hollywood Eve? Eve's Hollywood, excuse me. That was the first book of hers I read. I really liked it. But to be honest, I Used to Be Charming is my favorite Eve book because it deals with my history, my social history of sense, especially when she writes about the Ferris Gallery. and The Doors about Jim Morrison, and her chapter or article on Walter Hobbs and the Marcel Duchamp opening, which I went to as a child. I was like 8 or 9 years old when I went to see, and I met Duchamp. I did not play chess with Duchamp, nor did I take my clothes off, but even a child, that was such a famous, iconic picture. And Julian Weiser, who took the photograph, was another well-known Los Angeles citizen who took photographs of numerous celebrities, but also he would go to nightclubs, document nightclubs. And during the punk years, which I was totally involved in, he went to a lot of punk clubs and photographed the scenes there. So Eve's world was totally separate from me because we were sort of 12 years apart, and she was into like music that I was not into, which is like sort of the Laurel Canyon sound, which I hated. I still do. But I admire her because her appreciation, and she's very much part of that world. And her writing about my father, not about my father, but about the Ferris Gallery and Walter, is, I think, very, very precise. I think she's totally correct in everything. And she has a good eye, a good awareness, and she is very charming. And her writing styles, I just finished reading Swan's Way by Marcel Proust. And she's a better writer than Marcel Proust. I made that up. I need a dramatic gesture once in a while. But nevertheless, she strikes me as a person who documents and sees people in a social setting in a very accurate way, in a very wise and a very smart, and she's a really good writer. And I really admire her for her approach to her subject matter, documenting the scene, being very honest because she has relationships with these people. And it's kind of gossipy, but not like hardcore gossip. It's very respectful in a way. Yet, there's a sort of dangerous element when you read, you think you're going to pick up something kind of bad. My dad has mentioned the book, and it got me worried for a second. So I don't know about my father's relationship with her, but he definitely knew her not quite well, but he knew her because he knew all the other artists, and Eve was very much part of that social world and that social scene.
Yeah, I was going to say Eve's Buffalo Springfield cover and some of her other graphic design work was collage, a lot of collage and kind of assemblage type stuff like your father was known for. I was just wondering, if you guys had any general thoughts about sort of the climate of the LA art scene that allows for sort of these weird things to happen that feel like they can't happen other places.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Los Angeles to me is a very unique place at that time because there's a hardcore art scene happening with the Ferris Gallery, and there was a lot of galleries. Yet in New York at the time, in the 60s, New York was very centered in mind. So a couple times I visited like New York, it was always kind of surprising because they sort of thought of Los Angeles as sort of like a frontier town, and they really didn't take it seriously. Special writers from, mostly writers, critics from art form at the time, which is ironic because art form started above Ferris Gallery, but Los Angeles never looked at itself. It never took itself seriously. It never documented its history like it does in New York. New York has a very strong sense of culture and history and society. In Los Angeles, you don't have that class system or that society, at least visually, or at least the way I was raised.
Yeah, how about you, Geoff?
Oh yeah. So of course I had no personal relations, acquaintance or anything with anyone in the scene or in the book. So I encountered Eve Babitz entirely as a writer. Obviously I knew there was this picture of a nude woman and Duchamp playing chess, but I had no idea who the woman was. So actually, although I'll go on. One thing I would like to ask you two, I think it might be of interest to everyone. I'd never heard of her. So the question is this: how completely forgotten was she before the Vanity Fair / NYRB revival? I think that would be of great interest to me.
Yeah, I actually had not read Eve because she was mostly out of print until a friend of mine, a New York writer named Emily Gould, started a ebook imprint label that was mostly dedicated to republishing out of print female authors And one of the first people they published was Eve. And she said to me specifically, oh, I think you would, love this writer. She's like the greatest LA writer. You have so much, you guys have stuff in common. And then when I did read Eve for the first time, I went to used bookstores and sought it out and found some out-of-print ones. I was glad I hadn't read it earlier because I would have just given up on writing. I would have been like, oh, here's this person who said all the things that I want to say always when people say LA is like a place without culture or a place for idiots or, the things that people say that don't know what they're talking about. And she says it so well in the way she talks about how so many of the things about LA are these things written by outsiders, or written by transplants that are treated as sort of a metaphor almost, like LA is this place that represents everything bad in the world. And those of us who live here, and especially who grew up here, as I did, I think we know it's also, very much just a place that is a regular place with its own, with, a working class, and not everybody's in the film industry. And we have a lot of great cultural scenes that are not maybe as overblown or self-mythologized as scenes are other places, because we have, by default, we have to have sort of a sense of humor about it here. But yeah, I also think Eve was the reason I think she's gotten so much traction, especially right now, is because she's so sort of proto-internet writing to me. Her writing is so stream of consciousness-y feeling, but very well crafted, to make it feel like it's spontaneous, but it's obviously very well thought out, which is so hard to do. And when I and a lot of other people, a lot of other young women writers especially, were starting to write on the internet, we were thinking like, oh, here's this new frontier that we can treat sort of like new journalism or something, and just write in a way that wouldn't be published in a print magazine probably at this point. And I think now we're sort of getting to a point where maybe the internet isn't as much of a place for that anymore, so maybe some of those people are going back into print. I've mentioned Gia Tolentino's book, Trick Mirror, which is a book of essays about the internet and femininity and stuff that I really feel like is sort of, she's another writer who came out of the internet, who I feel like has just a very strong voice and is very much herself and, is speaking from a first-person point of view. So yeah, I think Eve's sort of ability to speak through time and feel so modern is what makes her, sort of impossible to forget.
But the question was, I'm wondering how completely was she forgotten, or did she live on as a sort of local legend, if you like?
I think, I knew her as a writer for forever, and I see her as more as a cult figure. Mm-hmm. Like people in the know would know her work, and she was not obscure in my mind, but probably in the general framework of the literary world, yes. But she struck me as, her books did become out of print, but not difficult to find if you go to a used bookstore, especially on the internet, finding her work. And she has a colorful history. I mean, like her godfather is Stravinsky. That's kind of amazing to me. And Stravinsky was her godfather, and her father was a violinist, and so she has this really, really deep cultural background.
Yeah, but lots of, having a famous father doesn't count for anything, does it?
Yes, it does.
Well, it does. I can see it helps, but it doesn't constitute an achievement in itself. It really doesn't.
It's her talent, the way she lived. A lot of it is doing, I think, because of her personality in her life, and therefore people pick up on her writing, and the fact that she's looked at the Los Angeles landscape in a very sort of sexual manner, and very much with sort of the 60s feeling, including the music scene as it was happening. I think if you're interested in the Doors or interested in Buffalo Springfield, the name Eve Babitz will come up in your research somewhere down the line. You're going to go, who is this Eve? Why? How does she know Ed Ruscha and Jim Morrison and Marcel Duchamp? How did that work?
Yeah, it's interesting that she sort of did bridge a bunch of different countercultural eras in Los Angeles, where she was like Zelig, just sort of there for everything seemingly, but also taking notes, going to these parties, but not just socializing, clearly sort of thinking about everything and turning it into writing.
I don't know if her friends took her seriously as a writer or not. I don't know if she had that type of relationship with her fellow.
Well, I guess that's an interesting thing because, I mean, there's, I think the problem with her status as a writer, we can reduce it to just two words, party girl. And the first word, party, I remember during the fatwa against Salman Rushdie in England, there was a slight resentment that he was using up all of this sort of, all of our tax pounds on police protection when people sort of held it against him that he liked going to parties a lot, as though that meant, I mean, it's always been okay for male writers to drink a lot, but the drinking of Hemingway and Kerouac, that was seen as some sort of direct expression of the intolerable burden of their vocation. But partying, okay, so partying is a bit suspect anyway. And then the other thing, girl, she's a woman writer, and I think one of the great charms of her, one of the great pleasures of her writing, Molly, and I think it's so good what your first line in the introduction when you said, geez, what fun it is to read Eve Babitz. It's a lot of fun. And then I guess, when you contrast her with, two other writers. I mean, Susan Sontag, of course, who, let's say, took herself incredibly seriously, but more than that, also elevated seriousness to this great height, where the idea of, I mean, there's just no humor at all in Sontag's books. And then the other person, of course, Joan Didion, who's often seen as the kind of some sort of voice of California, but in many ways she's a very inappropriate voice because that key component of Southern Californian life, which William Finnegan sums up so well in what he says is the oxymoron of being aggressively relaxed. That clenched brittleness that you get in Joan Didion is it's weirdly inappropriate. Then we come to Eve Babitz, and when I read her, there was this instant thing of thinking, oh my God, the Eve Babitz style is so appropriate for this part of the world. But part of the reason it's such a delight to read, so easy to read, is precisely because she doesn't take herself seriously. In fact, is all the time sort of doing herself down. And unfortunately, I fear that really it does, even though it's an essential human quality, to actually not be taking yourself serious as a writer means that other people don't. And this is for me, I mean, I first of all read Eve's Hollywood, and I quite liked it. But there was a kind of clumsiness in it, and I thought that was the major book. But then my friend Matthew Spector, who introduced this book, he said, this is the Eve Babitz masterpiece, and perhaps at some point we can talk more about what we think are the really great Eve Babitz books. For me, it was this one, and this is the one where it seems to me there was just that perfect balance between profundity and lightness. It's a seriously funny book, and there's the key line in it for me where it's in that great story, or actually this is something else we could discuss. The piece "Bad Day at Palm Springs." I mean, is it a story? I mean, what is she writing? She's a very contemporary writer, in that when you're reading her, you're never quite sure what is this? Is it an essay? Is it a story, or what? And there's this moment here after this. I mean, this is one of her funniest pieces, and she says, "Janet and Sean too were nice, but I thought that of all the days in my life that were rotten, this one in Palm Springs was probably going to be the worst." In a frivolous kind of way, of course. And that seems to me, in a nutshell, that is the Eve Babitz thing, that she's so conscious that it's, of course, ludicrous, leading this privileged, carefree life of hers, to say she's had a terrible time, and she's so knowing like that. And always, as well, this is the other thing that I'll say quickly before handing on. I mean, she's such a great writer of gags, and increasingly, I mean, I feel I don't want to read any writers who are not funny. And it seems to me that she is screamingly funny, and she's so mastered that thing of the kind of cumulative punchline. You read a couple of sentences, you get to the punchline, it's really funny, but then there's another punchline on top of that, or even better, there's a line which kind of undermines the gag, and the bottom drops out of it into some sort of fathomless despair. But anyway, so it's that. Yeah, it's just it's that lightness of touch is so important. But I feel it's been a bit of an obstacle to her being taken seriously.
Well, I feel like also what you were saying about that sort of the difficulty of classifying it as one genre or another, which again to me feels very LA to sort of operate in these spaces between forms and be like, it's its own thing. It doesn't have to be one specific, it doesn't have to be just an essay or just a fiction story. It can be both of those things. And just the form of the book is a collection of essays. It all feels very contemporary.
This one, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, all of the books, and Slow Days, Fast Company, which is formulated as sort of almost like an album, where it's like a series of essays that it's like songs in a track listing that, build on each other and come back to each other and add up to this thing that's sort of, elliptical in a way. Yeah, do you guys have favorite essays from this book or any of the books?
Oh, yeah, loads.
Yeah.
I mean, Tosh mentioned the Jim Morrison one, which is, of course, it's great, partly because, of course, we love hearing about Jim Morrison, but I remember reading it and just that kind of thing where she talks about, first of all, the way that, we think of him after he got all boozy as being a bit fat, but she's, right from the start, she says, oh, he's just really pudgy. And also then the way that she just dismisses the poetry as hogwash. I mean, that is just such genius.
Right, because it's lovingly written. It's I think she's written a lot of the greatest profiles of rock stars of that era, especially, and they're all written in this way where she's sort of, she understands what's seductive about them, but she's also like, they're very silly for the most part. There's one about Graham Parsons that's also, here he is, this very like aristocratic person, but who writes these beautiful songs, and a lot of her stories about the people she knows will have these very sad endings at the end, where she'll say, oh, and then this person kind of, fell off track, and the last I heard from them, they were a junkie, and but she'll remember them as sort of like, this is when I knew them, and they were this beautiful shining star. There's the essay in Eve's Hollywood about the girls she went to high school with, all the beautiful girls who are not celebrities, but she just talks about, here were the most beautiful girls in my high school who were all so insanely beautiful that they all could have been movie stars, but, here's what happened to all of them. I love that essay. And I think sexism is a big reason that she did fall out of print in the first place, because I do think, especially somebody who was looking for sort of counterculture female writers to want to model myself after, I was always wished there was somebody like Eve who was like a female gonzo writer, who really experienced everything and who was so sort of lusty in a way that, like you were saying, Joan Didion is very frontier-like in a way, in that she's like the Puritan observer sort of all the. But that makes sense because she's from Sacramento, which is sort of a buttoned-up place, and it's more of a. And I do think there is a difference in sort of the Northern California and Southern California styles, although I think it's become a little bit less because now Northern California is not very cool anymore because of Silicon Valley taking it over.
It's a tragedy.
Yeah, so I'm glad people are now recognizing that LA has culture, although obviously those of us who've been here all along are like, about time.
I mean, yeah, and it's I like these trips that she does to San Francisco, and it's these sort of off-the-cuff moments of brilliance that I enjoy so much. She goes to hear Allen Ginsberg read Howl, it's outrageous. And she says, the thing that really shocked her, she says, is that a man of that age could be wearing sandals. So it is really, there's just we could spend ages just reading out our favourite bits, but yeah, there's just a ton of stuff like that.
She's an exceptional great travel writer.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
She's really good. I mean, you could picture anywhere she's at. And I love the chapter about her going to New York to meet the Coppola people.
The one about The Godfather is one of my favorites for sure. Yeah. Also because I feel like that's something that could never get written today, because they would never let you say anything vaguely mean about a director of a big movie that's coming out in a profile. But I love that she says, I'm an insider, they let me come because I knew everybody. They're letting me write this because I know everybody, so I'm going to be honest about it. And again, it's written very lovingly. You know, everybody comes off sort of good in the end. And it's good because it exposes the idea that all these great masterpieces were just made, that everything flowed perfectly and went according to plan. It's like, no, this guy wandered off in the middle because he got drunk. And she explains how a New York actor stuck all day on a soundstage might get bored waiting for people to film and wander off and get drunk. She says, totally understandable.
It's very clever.
It's so funny.
Yes, and there's this great bit at the beginning when she says, all the women in New York have posters of Robert Redford on their walls. If they came to Los Angeles, they'd find Redford parking their cars and saving their lives on the beaches of Santa Monica. Redfords are a dime a dozen in L.A. These are just such wonderful observations. And then I like the way also she is, unlike Didion as well, she's always a participant in the action as well. There's none of that thing of being a disinterested observer. And then there's this kind of really just incredibly, she's always, when she is being a participant, she's just saying these consistently brilliant things so that, she goes to see The Godfather Part 2. And of course, Coppola wants to know about it. And she says, Francis, your movie really is a masterpiece. You know how I can tell? How, he says. She replies, it's flawed. Which really floored me, actually, that exchange.
Right, because she talks to these people, at the height of their fame and their power, and she's the person who is willing to say, hey, I know you're a little bit full of shit still, and that,
this is something else that you can maybe... you're in a much better position than me to answer, Molly. But, I love that off-the-cuff quality, the casualness of it. But as we all know now, Kerouac kept revising on the road to make it more spontaneous. And I wonder about the extent to which this very easygoing, light, casual quality was the product of a lot of rewriting on her part.
Well, I think it was also the product of a conscious construction on her part, which she talks about in the title essay in this book, And I Used to Be Charming, which is about her accident. And that essay I also was really floored by, because in that she sort of deconstructs the Eve Babitz persona and says, here I am undergoing this incredibly physically painful thing, and I refuse to stop making jokes about it, because that's my way of dealing with it and of making it, something she can process. And then she sort of goes into it. She goes, am I just doing this because I don't want to face anything serious in my life? She lets herself have it the way she lets everybody else have it. And it's still, she comes out so funny at the end still. That's what I also love, is that she's not judgmental of anybody ever. She portrays people as they are, but she never passes judgment on how people live their lives. And it's getting to a place where she can not pass judgment on herself in that essay, I thought was so powerful.
That's why I like her work.
Yeah. Maybe we can take some questions from the audience now. Does anybody have any questions? Or any comments?
What is the book that you held up?
Would it have been this one?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's Slow Days, Fast Company, which, given that Eve's Hollywood is so much bigger, and I think it's packaged as offered as a novel, isn't it?
I think it is.
Yeah, and so I assumed this was the kind of, this was the one that she wrote in order to build up the stamina for writing the bigger book, Eve's Hollywood. But no, it's the other way around. This skimpier looking book, for me, is a much finer work in many ways. So yeah, Slow Days, Fast Company, but the one we're really pimping tonight as this one. And I guess it's worth saying as well that because of this sort of easygoing relationship she has about form, the traffic between stuff that she's doing for magazines in this book and the stuff that you get in here, which is her own book. I mean, the traffic is continuous, and there's a couple of pieces in this book about dancing, and they get transmuted into, tonally they're very similar to stories addressing the same subject matter in Black Swans. I think that's right to say.
Yeah, I mean, also her novels, she has a few books of fiction which can also sort of function. I think they're all a little bit Romana Clef-y. There's people in it that you can maybe recognize as real life figures, but they're sort of more fictionalized enough for it to be considered fiction. But again, I just feel like she really fits in with all these Ferris Gallery artists that she's just making completely new things that have nothing to do with sort of the old ways, because there's not that pressure to be part of a tradition.
Ferris Gallery, I think, must have been very, very difficult for a certain type of woman to be involved in.
For
because
sure.
It was very much of a male-orientated.
Well, she was
culture.
clearly present in all these boys' clubs, but she also is friends with lots of women, which is the other thing. When I found out that she and Anne Rice were friends, that was very... It's like, oh, right, because they're both just like female weirdos with their creating your own world. And I think it is sort of lonelier to be a woman who does things like that, and that to me is what I found so inspiring about her. Is this is somebody who really just dedicated herself to her craft, who had a mission that she had to make these things and did it. But all these artists that were male, had wives, I think, to sort of deal with a lot of the administrative part, and if they wanted to have a family, to raise kids for them. And I think for Eve to sort of choose this path of being an artist is much harder for a woman to go to choose that, and that's what makes it so great.
Yeah, but I think it's really your question about which book I was holding up. I think it's really interesting this moment. I mean, to make a more general point, now you publish a book, and you've either got, say, 2 or 3 weeks that determine the success or failure of that book. And quite often, to a great extent, actually the success or failure of the book is pretty well determined by the time it's published. That's depressing, of course. But I think one of the wonderful things about the NYRB thing is that they're reissuing these books, which have often been forgotten. And what they're doing, they've redefined the idea of the classic, i.e., quite often they're reissuing forgotten books as classics, which, and by classics they mean actually a book that sank without trace the moment it was published. And I think, so there have been some very successful rehabilitations, if you like. I guess one of the biggest ones would be Stoner by John Williams. And I think it's going to be really interesting now that I think I'm right in saying that, this is it's all in print now, Eve Babitz. So there's that body of work. And I reckon it'll be interesting to see if her status as a writer, that's the crucial thing, will be properly achieved now, and if she'll be discussed seriously. And I think as part of that as well, you've got to concede that not all the books are of equal value. I mean, LA Woman seems to me an incredibly weak book. I hope I'm not offending anyone else.
That was my favorite book.
Oh, okay.
Well, I like them
Doors
all.
album,
I think they're interesting too, because again, like you were saying, it's like, well, it's flawed. It's not perfect, If it were, nobody's got a perfect, you have to try things. And again, I think that is a thing. LA gives you a lot of space to sort of try things out, just in terms of, feels like there's physical space, but also just mental space to sort of go in directions that maybe other people, you're not working off a blueprint of somebody else. Mirandy is Eve's sister. She's in the front row tonight. We're very happy to have her here. Would you like to have a mic? Yeah. Sure. Thank you so much.
Hi. Actually, I just wanted to answer a couple of your questions.
Sure.
Please.
Because I'm Eve's sister, Mirandy. And one of the questions I thought, she really did sink entirely from sight for quite a long time. And it was, which, she took that, and she's been very reclusive. And, but, it was Lily Analich's interest, which, I kind of worked alongside Lily for about 3 years, just to get the Vanity Fair piece out, which then led to, everything really pretty much, working with Erica again and redoing the, Eve's books. She also, I just wanted to tell you that she totally rewrote everything constantly. It was an arduous, process to get to that lightness, and so I think she was pretty serious as a writer always. And anyway, so that's what I wanted.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
I mean, all writers feel hard done by. They all feel they haven't got the recognition they deserve. But I wonder, the fact that she hasn't written much in the last however many years, did she feel that she hadn't had recognition as a writer that she deserved, and did that play a part in her sort of not writing?
Not
more?
really. I think what happened was she kept on writing really up until the accident, and which was in 1997, and it was so major, and her herself afterwards was so completely different, that she tried, the piece that is in this book, I Used to Be Charming, was really, really hard work for about 2 years to even, pull that out of her, and it was kind of a mess, and, she just said, that's it, I'm not gonna, I can't do this, so I don't want to not do it, I don't want to be bad at it, so she just withdrew, and, became really very reclusive, and kind of just got rid of everybody she could get rid of, which did not include me, but I'm probably only because I'm family, but it was she just, I don't think she could write anymore, or she would have, because it was always her heart, to write, and so anyway.
I want to say I think I Used to Be Charming is, one of her greatest works, absolutely. And so all the editing and work that went into it, thank you so
Sarah,
much.
thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, and thanks to Sarah Kramer of the New York Review of Books, who is not here tonight because she's in New York, but set this all up.
And she asked us, she said many kind things
Yeah.
about all of you for being here. And she said, actually, that this was the panel that she would most like to sit with. That she'd almost fly out here just to do it.
Well, now that we have you here, maybe you could convey a personal request to Eve from me that, if she could be persuaded to write something else. I mean, I've always hoped that she would write something about Art Pepper.
Wow.
That's not an unreasonable request, is it?
Well, that job belongs to our cousin Laurie Pepper.
Well, indeed. I mean, I know that Laurie has done that, but I'm always interested to get Eve's take on anybody.
Art? Wow.
But,
it just doesn't flow anymore. She can't make it happen. So I think she's written all we're going to get out of her.
I've seen she's made some sort of self-deprecating comments about like, oh, well, what good is all the attention now?
Yes, she said, She said, publicity is really wonderful except when you're in your 70s.
But again, that was such a funny thing to
It's
say,
She's still funny.
Yeah.
She's still totally got that,
Well, thank you so much, everybody. Anyone else have any
Let's see
questions
you,
or anything?
Luann. We've met on a couple of panels, right? I think I saw you with Lily Analich's.
We'll chit-chat, sorry.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I think in LA there is a tendency of people to try and sort of, pave over history all the time, and you have to sort of make these connections yourself. And, she says that thing about you have to know somebody to show you around, and she's really the best person you could have to show you around LA. And I feel like so many of the things that she says about LA in the 70s, I just feel like are still true today.
I think, as I mentioned, I think she's very, very accurate.
Yeah.
Description.
So yeah, we're all very proud to be to be here and to be affiliated with this, because she's the best representative for LA writers we could possibly have. And I hope other female writers will come into print again that we might also not know about. Reissue more people that are cool. Well, cool. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out, and thanks to Skylight for hosting.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.